I'd like to welcome you all to the Bald Head Association Candidate Forum. Today we have the opportunity to hear from 5 candidates who are interested in running for the board of Bald Head Association. 4 are present, 1 is unable to make it. We have with us today Tiffany Williams, we have Joel Michaels, Victoria Lonker, and William Bourne, and Mr. Derek Crump was unable to be here today. I wanted to review with you the way this will work today. And as an overview, each candidate will have up to 3 minutes per answer. At the 2-minute, 30-minute mark, if you're still speaking, the candidate will be given a 30-second alert from me. I will say 30 if that happens. At the 3-minute mark, if you're still speaking, I will say time is up and we will move to the next candidate. Direct engagement from candidate to candidate is not permitted. This is not a debate. A rotation of the sequence for the candidate's response will occur for each question. We'll draw for the first one and then go down the line so the same person's not answering the question first each time, if that makes sense. The total time for the forum is expected at approximately 2 hours with 6 questions each. None of you know what the questions are this time. There will be a short break after the 3rd question and then we'll reconvene. The forum will be recorded and transcribed. Responses will be made later for BHA members to read after this forum. Are there any questions about this? If not, I'll draw for the first question. Okay, Mr. Bourne. Mr. Bourne, why are you interested in becoming a board member at Bald Head Association?
I've been here about 11 years and I have served on the ARC for 6. And during that time, I've seen a lot of changes going on, certainly with ARC. But I've seen some changes going on the island with what people are building and how the island is changing. I know it's going to grow. I know it's going to change. But the things I'm seeing are people wanting to build excessively large homes on the smaller lots. And it's not allowed at the moment. It's not allowed. And I think that they're kind of putting their money ahead of what we built here. I'm very respectful of the rules and the regulations that we do have. And I feel like we need to continue to enforce them and keep our small cottage, single family atmosphere.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, why are you interested in becoming a board member at Bald Head Association?
I'm interested in becoming a board member because I have lived on this island and been a business owner on this island for 25 years. I've served in many volunteer capacities on this island, and I've been a previous board member of the BHA. I think that the current board lacks transparency in its operations, and I think that there needs to be a more clearly defined goals and direction from the board, and I would like to help facilitate that.
Thank you. Michaels, why are you interested in becoming a board member at Bald Head Association?
I'm interested in becoming a member because of my history with the island, which goes back to 1991. And I've owned a house here since 2002. And when I look at the island and my relationship to it, what drew me to the island initially is still what makes it valuable and important to me today. And that is the island is unique. And it is unique because of its controls over growth and what kind of housing can be constructed here. And the Bald Head Association is a critical part of managing that growth. And that was a key interest. What also prompted me was, quite frankly, the perceived disruption in the way the board was operating over this last year with major personnel changes that were highly disruptive. I don't think I would have entered into this race if circumstances were more normal. This is not a normal situation. And in response to that, I felt I had to step up and run for this position.
Thank you. Ms. Lonker, Why are you interested in becoming a board member at Bald Head Association?
I'm interested in becoming a board member as an opportunity to contribute back. I've been on the island about 10 years, or a little over 10 years, and had the opportunity to see many of the people in this room do their part to be good stewards of our community, and I'd really like the opportunity to do the same. I think that we're at a pivotal time in our association because we're starting to transition really from the previous management really grew limited and the number of votes and properties that were held to our own association that is fully controlled by its members. And I'd like to be a part of making sure we have that transparency, not just in how the board operates, but in how the staff operates, how we manage ourselves fiscally, how every cent is used of our money is used in this association. And I think the board has the responsibility to ask the tough questions, which sometimes is difficult and sometimes creates a little friction, but it's the board's responsibility. We're here to know the answers to those questions and to protect the interests of our homeowners. And I think it's time to make sure that we are managing growth effectively. Like many folks have said here, I agree with that. And I think there's a great opportunity to continue to make sure this island keeps the characteristics that drew most of us here, whether you're generator society members or new homeowners coming today. And we need to continue to make it a welcoming place for all, not just for some.
Thank you. Okay, second question, Ms. Williams. Tell us about any prior board or nonprofit committee experience you have and how that may be helpful if you are elected.
Well, as I said a minute ago, I've served on the Bald Head Association. I'm president of the Merchants Row HOA, and I'm on the Royal James HOA. And I would say more importantly, I have served on the ARC for at least on and off for the last 12 plus years. And I have an understanding of how the BHA works, as well as the design guidelines, which are critical to the island and the ARC process and how that works, and how I have a greater understanding of the ARC process, both from being on the board and being on the committee, and as a user of the ARC. The ARC affects many property owners, and that there are things associated with the ARC and the design guideline that could be perhaps streamlined and or made more user-friendly for property owners.
Thank you. Mr. Michaels, tell us about any prior board or nonprofit committee experience you have and how that may be helpful if you are elected.
Two things I can mention. I think one is my role on the Long Range Planning Committee, which I've been on for over 4 years, where you get to project about the future of the island and how growth will impact the island. So I think that is a key background. I think the other part of it is knowing how to manage personnel based on prior experience, where I had to oversee groups of lawyers, and there are ways to handle personnel issues that are what I would call good corporate practices. And that's kind of, I think, the skill set and expertise that I would like to bring to this board, which is there's a way for the board to function. There's a way for a board to oversee personnel, but I'm not sure that role is requiring the board members to get directly involved in personnel issues and matters of sensitivity of that nature. So I think I would be taking the experience I've had as a corporate lawyer, counseling legal companies on what is the best way to manage themselves, and bring some of those skills here. I also was a member of an HOA board, so I understand the nonprofit environment. I understand the responsibility that the board has to the community. And yes, I understand it's not like a regular corporate business. but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a license to move off of what are good corporate practice and business management skills because of the nonprofit nature of the entity.
Thank you. Ms. Locker, tell us about any prior board or nonprofit committee experience you have and how that may be helpful if you are elected.
I started a homeowners association in a community in Virginia. That was a self-managed association. And so I've experienced kind of doing it from scratch, recognizing the need to protect. It was a non-developer community, so, you know, protecting the interests, the varied interests of the homeowners who bought property and built their own homes without necessarily any guidelines that required them to be similar or, you know, protect the overall good. So creating an association from scratch and motivating members to come together for guidelines, come together for committee involvement and activity was something that I think is part of my DNA anyway. I have also been a part of a homeowners association in Cary, North Carolina, as a leader there for many years. That one did have a staff that we outsourced to manage some of the day-to-day operations. So I have a good understanding of the responsibilities of a board to direct and provide strategic planning for staff, but also, you know, trust but verify and expect that staff will execute according to the direction from the board, and that the board needs to follow up on that direction. Again, that's board responsibility to make sure that staff is operating in the way that the membership expects and in support of the membership, both board and staff. So have experience in making sure that kind of happens. Finally, I did run a large alumni association in Richmond with about 20,000 members, managed a significant budget when I was president of that. And again, motivating people to participate versus just chatter about what they don't like. I'm pretty good at helping, you know, bring forth folks that may want to help be part of the change, but they got to get involved to do that rather than just talk about it. And so I think as a board member here, I could bring those skills in addition to my corporate skills where I led large organization, absolutely responsible for profit, but sometimes having to do that in a way that it wasn't profitable because we also had to support government regulations for rate bases. So again, designing solutions, solving problems, that's something I'm pretty passionate.
Mr. Bourne, tell us about any prior board or nonprofit committee experience you have and how that may be helpful if you are elected.
Okay. Well, serving 6 years on the ARC has given me a really valuable insight into the way the association operates and its rules and regulations. Also served on a planning committee for the BHA Club. Served on a planning committee for the BHA Club. I was a board member for the Hilma Country Club back in Tarboro, which is North Carolina, which is my home. I was president of the local county arts council and served on the Chamber of Commerce and also various church committees. So I've had a lot of nonprofit experience. I've led fundraising efforts to great success with the Arts Council at home, and spent a lot of time reflecting on my ballhead experience. I grew up on an island. I spent my summers on Cape Lookout, 8 houses on 40 miles of beach. So I'm very familiar with island life, pretty much generator society. My family had a house for 80 years on this island. So I really do appreciate the beauty and the nature, and I want to make sure that we ensure that we continue to keep it that way.
Thank you. Okay, question 3. We'll start with Mr. Michaels. What do you view as key issues for Bald Head Association in the next 3 years and your initial plans to deal with them? Is there one priority you have among these issues?
I think a couple of the key issues, again, I'll return to personnel and oversight of personnel and creating the right kind of process by which performance of personnel, the use of personnel files are being addressed in a way that makes sense and allows the board to provide its policy making and conduct its supervisory role, but in a way that does not create the kind of difficulties that I've seen occur over the past year. So a revisiting of the personnel process and how the board relates to that process would be key. The other thing is the design guidelines, to take a look at how they could be revised. And if anyone is interpreting my remarks as I'm for some kind of wholesale elimination of design guidelines, the answer is absolutely not. But if the design guidelines can be made to be more understandable, more readable, and therefore also more consistently enforced, those would be important objectives for, I think, the board to consider and think about. So a reevaluation of the design guidelines and their presentation. Maybe the third thing would be an educational process for developers and for homeowners who are building their first homes here, so that they get to know how this process works on the front end, so there are less surprises. And maybe this goes to the issue of transparency, but to get the critical information out so that people know that you just can't cut out a picture from Home Beautiful, bring it to your architect and say, here, build this on Bald Head Island. It won't work that way. You need to have a good understanding of the parameters. And I think with good transparency and good information that's digestible, then you'll get better cooperation from homeowners, architects, and developers going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Locker, what do you view as key issues for Bald Head Association in the next 3 years and your initial plans to deal with them? Is there one priority you have among these issues?
I think as we have, I might not have these numbers exactly right, but around 1,300 homes versus 700 or some undeveloped lots. We're in the phase of maintenance more than we're in the phase of new builds. And while we need to control that growth and manage the process for new builds, we also have homes that are turning over in ownership that are 20, 30 years old that need updates and changes. We need to be cognizant of the fact that building guidelines have changed during those times. And so to the point others have made, the ARC process does need to be simpler, needs to be more streamlined. I'd love to see fewer ARCs in the association to make have a more consistent approach. And I'd like to see us communicate better to homeowners the stats. And maybe that's a little bit of my engineering background coming in, but I want to know how many ARC requests were received, how many were approved, what was the time of those, do we have a service level commitment to our homeowners, and how fast we're going to turn around things. Why aren't they moving as quickly as the homeowners or the builders, might expect? So it's not criticism of the ARC. It's a relook at the process. And I've listened to the board meetings. I understand there have been multiple revisions of the guidelines, and multiple people have spent hours and hours to do that. But that doesn't mean it's a one and done process. I think it's a continuous thing we have to look at, as painful as that may be, to help us streamline our growth and how we report to our homeowners how well we're doing. And I think sometimes we take that for granted, that people know or they hear about it through other meetings or mechanisms. And we just may need to step up the use of communications in a way that gives people a sense that that board and the association and the staff, because it's not just the board, are really working for them and for their interests. And not insulated, and not trying to keep homeowners insulated from the difficulty. I think sometimes people need to understand the difficulty in order to appreciate the process that we have to go through. I'm very, passionate about fiscal responsibility. I want to understand and get underneath why my dues are what they are. It's not enough for me to look at a budget and do the math and divide by the number of lots or homeowners. I really want to know what's underneath that. And I think we have an opportunity to share that with the homeowners.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, what do you view as key issues for Bald Head Association in the next 3 years and your initial plans to deal with them? Is there one priority you have among these issues?
I think our first priority is to place and get our management settled. and hire the appropriate people that we need that will be strong and lead us into a new millennium, I guess I should say. I think openness and communication should be one of their priorities. As far as ARC, which I'm most experienced with, the process is very slow. I think the process can be sped up. The guidelines are very specific. I would be inclined to recommend that we review all the guidelines. I don't suggest we change a whole lot, but I think they can be made into a more cohesive thing that architects and builders can look at and have a better understanding of what they can and can't do. I would also like to see the association, rather than be the watchdog of the island, to be a front runner and support the homeowners. Help us do things that we need to do to maintain what we have. And also those people that are non-resident homeowners, be a voice for those people also.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, what do you view as key issues for Bald Head Association in the next 3 years and your initial plans to deal with them? Is there one priority you have among these issues?
I think the most important priority is the personnel issue. First of all, I think the BHA is understaffed, considerably understaffed. And my priority would be to understand why several key people that have worked here for many years quit the organization. And I don't think just going out and hiring people is necessarily the initial answer, because unless you understand why people that have worked here for many, many years left the organization, without fixing the problem, you're not fixing the problem. So I would say that's my first priority. I would say the second priority is having clearly defined goals for the board and a direction. When I served on the board before, we had, I felt like we had very clearly defined goals, and I'm not sure that I feel that of the current board. And with regard to the ARC, I think there could be a better level of education, whether that's providing a customer service person or some sort of liaison that would be able to help property owners better understand the guidelines and get them to the finish line in a timely and satisfactory manner for everybody involved.
Okay, thank you. Well, you all are concise in your answers, but we will, as we said, take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:30, please. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll reconvene now, please, for the final 3 questions. And the next question will start with Ms. Locker. Ms. Locker, what is your description of the roles of the board and the management of Bald Head Association?
I believe the role of the board is to set the direction and strategy of the organization based on input from the membership, which means you have to be in touch with the membership and understand what they're looking for as well. And then overseeing the execution of that strategy and direction by the staff and the volunteers that are associated with that. That might include making sure the right committees are in place to do the work that's necessary to manage to the objectives. But it's also about making sure staff is doing the same. And I know there's been turnover in staff, but you know, I think some of that is the past is past. And how do we look forward and say turnover is a natural part of organizations anyway? There may be root causes that can be addressed and fixed, but I think we need to dwell, the board itself needs to dwell on the future of our association. How do we streamline it? How do we make it a great place for volunteers to come participate on the committees, without which we could not run? And how do we make it a place that, you know, staff do want to work and are welcome to do their job? The board really has the responsibility, though, to make sure our affairs are in order, to make sure just because we pass an audit doesn't necessarily mean everything's neat and tidy. It may mean that, and I'm not insinuating it's not, saying the board has the responsibility to also dig deep, to answer to the homeowners and make sure that we're using their pennies very effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Bourne. What is your description of the roles of the board and the management of Bald Head Association?
I think the board should set the culture of the association. I would hope that the culture would change to that of being a helpful organization and guiding organization. I think hiring the new employees would be the most critical thing. But I think the board, once you hire that person and you give them your goals, they should run the organization. The board should just be in an overseeing capacity, not a day-to-day operation type of thing. I would like to see more openness and more transparency, of course, and perhaps some streamlining to limit the focus of what the association does. I think we do a lot of things that maybe we don't really need to do that much anymore in the modern age, I guess. But I really think boards should just be an overseer. If you hire the best people and you hire the right people, the association should be able to run on its own, and we handle and oversee any problems that may arise.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, what is your description of the roles of the board and the management of Bald Head Association?
I think the role of the board is to carry out the vision of the association. And I think the vision of the association, that I look at the association as the backbone of our community. It's vital to sustaining the quality of life that we enjoy on this island, and we all hope it is preserved. And I think the board is responsible for making sure that that vision is carried out, and that the other components that property owners have enjoyed, like the recreation and the social and recreation activities, continue to benefit the property owners. And I believe the board also has a responsibility to make sure that the communication between what is happening on the island and the property owners continues, so that everyone is aware of what's happening and has a voice, and knows that they have a place that they can go and express their concerns or opinions or views as to how they think things should happen on the island going forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michaels, what is your description of the roles of the board and management of Bald Head Association?
Well, the role of the board should be to establish policy for the organization, and yes, to oversee the implementation of those policies by the executive director, who will be responsible for day-to-day management. Having the board involved in day-to-day operations, I think, becomes problematic, and is one of the reasons why we have some of the difficulties we've encountered so far. I think the other thing about members of the board is to have an appreciation for what I call staying in your lane, which means you understand what your role is as a board member. You're not the CEO of the organization. You're not responsible for day-to-day execution of policy. So that's important. And also to understand the role of the various committees that serve the board. I'll give you two examples based on my experience with the Long Range Planning Committee. In one case, an issue was brought to us to consider the selling of the association building, this building. And had somebody on the board or others gotten just the critical facts together, it would become quite clear that that was a process that would be non-productive based on the deed restrictions that existed with the property. So as a board member, making sure you get the facts from staff before you bring issues to the board. And then having another example was more recently is the Long Range Planning Committee being asked to assess questions regarding staffing or the financial and tax reporting mechanisms of the current operation. That's not what a long range planning committee should be doing. So staying in your lane, knowing what your role is as a board member, knowing what your role is vis-a-vis the officers of the organization and the various committees is really important for the efficient and effective execution of the policy set by the board.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, and we'll start with Mr. Bourne. Do you think it is significant to improve rapport with the other island entities? If so, how would you improve those relationships to enhance the experience for Bald Head Association members?
From what I've seen so far, I think we have a fairly good rapport, especially with the village. I've seen, especially with ARC, when we're working with Stephen and that crowd, trying to make sure things are done appropriately under their area. And but I do think we could probably improve somewhat relations with some of the business community. And of course, limited is still very much part of our lives at this point. I don't think we have very good rapport with limited at the moment, and they still have a big hold on the island. So I think probably improving that. I think probably some new management and fresh ideas would help improve that. And I feel like that should be one of the things we should work on. But my overall theme is improving our relations with our members, because we seem to come off as a very large, overbearing institution, and I think we need to change that culture.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, do you think it is significant to improve rapport with the other island entities? If so, how would you improve those relationships to enhance the experience for Bald Head Association members?
Well, I would say that first of all, I think communication with the other island entities is critical. I'm not on the board, so I don't know the current state of affairs with the other island entities right now. I would say that the previous executive director had an excellent rapport and relationship with the other entities and did a great job bringing everybody together in terms of education and when things needed to be resolved. So I think it's critical that the BHA has a relationship with the other island entities. And I would be interested in knowing where the board stands with the other entities if I was elected to the board. But I don't know. I don't know, because I'm not on the board, what areas need to be improved.
Thank you. Mr. Michaels, do you think it is significant to improve rapport with the other island entities? If so, how would you improve those relationships to enhance the experience for Bald Head Association members?
Well, it certainly is important, and I would start with the business community. And going back to my earlier comments, being able to give them information that they can use and digest, avoid surprises, avoid delays in process, so that their economic experience with the island is worthwhile and not frustrating, while at the same time we have the ability to work with the implementation of a vision of the island that reflects our values from a quality of life perspective. So that's the business community. I think the other entity or part of the island where greater coordination would be useful would be, quite frankly, the village, because you can have all these controls over housing and development and so forth, but if the village is the entity that actually grants the occupancy permit of the building, having the BHA stuck sort of out there as an ancillary kind of activity that still has to be addressed, but is kind of not integrated or part of that process, is adding steps and the potential for confusion that I think could be avoided. So if I were to start focusing on looking around to entities or organizations, one area as a new board member that I would focus on is how do we improve the communication with the village and the exchanges with the village, particularly as it relates to the building and development process.
Thank you. Ms. Locker, do you think it is significant to improve rapport with the other island entities? If so, how would you improve those relationships to enhance the experience for Bald Head Association members?
Like others have said, I don't know that improve is the word that is necessary. Maybe, maybe not, because that would imply there's poor rapport existing today, and I can't assume that's the case. But I do think liaisons assigned by the board or the board members itself could be liaison to different entities within the island, whether that's the village, including, the police, who really have more contact with our homeowners and their guests probably than any other village authority, limited certainly, and the chamber. And I think it's important to have good relationships with all of those. There's another entity that I question whether we have any kind of dialogue with at all, and that's the county itself. We're the largest taxpayer in Brunswick County. And I think most of us would agree we get very little visible benefit from the county. We're even trying to get a polling place on the island, and that seems to be something that we're not entitled to, because I've been told we figured it out before. The Bald Head Island people will figure it out in the future. So I'd like to see us assign, folks maybe from the board to liaison with these different entities to make sure we understand what their strategic plans are and how those plans will impact us. And perhaps that is another role for the Long Range Planning Committee to actually help with that connection and understanding what the impact of our plans are on those entities and vice versa. It's got to be a two-way street. It's not just, we need to do the work to improve relationships. It's got to be something that we understand their priorities, they understand ours, and we're working together to benefit the total community.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Williams, question 6. If you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Yes. If you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's important that the board be unified in the decision-making process. We might not always agree on particular things, but I think it's important that as a board be unified, whether you personally agree on a particular topic or not. I think that's part of the meeting process and having been involved in that process of having a dialogue amongst board members. But I don't think it's productive to leave a board meeting and I don't think there's a confidentiality clause anyway. But I do think it's important that as a board, you present a unified stance on whatever the issue is.
Thank you. Mr. Michaels, if you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
I think the forum for the disagreement is in the context of the meeting itself. So the board member who disagrees should be prepared to present the data, information, and questions and register their vote, either for or against the proposition. But then once the decision is made by the board to somehow go out to in another avenue and begin to express, disagreements, I'll call them disagreements, with the decision that was made by the board, I don't think that engenders a lot of confidence or trust among the board members. So good communication within the context of the board meetings, good recordation of the board member who disagrees, so that his or her views are known, are really important. But once the decision is made, that's the company's outcome. That's the process, and you have to abide by that outcome. And therefore, creating another channel to sort of reiterate your disagreement or dispute the decision, to me, is not the best forum for it, and it engenders suspicion and mistrust. And the other thing I'll say is, when you disagree, okay, and you can feel strongly about an issue, there's no reason for the disagreement to be presented in a discourteous or a rude kind of manner. That also, I think, impedes proper communication and decision-making by the board. There's a way to disagree, present your side of it, and do that in a respectful manner without destroying the tenor of the meeting and becoming personal regarding your criticism of a board member's decision. So that kind of decorum, both inside the meeting, making sure the meetings run well, which requires, the president to oversee and keep the boundaries of the meeting going properly, is really important. But having a lot of stuff go on outside of the board meeting, I would not be in favor of that and be uninclined to use that external communication as a way of reiterating the disagreement, which I hopefully clearly expressed both in how I raised the issue and presented my vote in the meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Lumper, if you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
If I disagreed with the board on a decision, I would speak with one voice after the meeting. I think there's an opportunity for everyone to, state their position on a subject. So that can be, and that should be and can be done publicly. So both sides of a decision are kind of recorded, if you will, much like our Supreme Court may have dissenting voices and assenting voices, and they both write their decisions and they're made available for everyone to understand. And I think that's important to show both sides. And disagreement can be constructive. It should be constructive. It should say that we have an opportunity for dialogue. We have an opportunity to come together, but when we disagree, that should be handled in a civil manner. And after the meeting, no board member should ever sow the seeds of discontent and plant that in the, whether it's on social or elsewhere. So we do need to stand as one after difficult decisions are made, because you have an opportunity before that to state why you might be taking a counter view to the majority opinion. It's all about relationships. Board members should be able to have great relationships and work on those relationships outside of board meetings so that there's not rancor within the board, and we can disagree and still be friends at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Bourne, if you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
One voice. Once the board makes the decision, the board should stand together. I could go on, but I'll save time.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating. If we may give the candidates a round of applause for their willingness to serve. The members of the association will be getting more information about the candidates in the weeks ahead. There'll be 3 methodologies for voting. One will be online, one will be a directed proxy, which you'll receive soon with the annual meeting report, and the ballot the day of. So please stay tuned for that information. Again, thank you all for your willingness to participate in this, and this will be posted online later on. Thank you so much.
Mr. Crump, this is Russ Curtis. I'm the Interim Executive Director with Ballhead Association. I want to thank you for being with us today. And I wanted to go through a number of questions that would be a part of the candidate forum with you, if I may. Just to make sure I reiterate the way this is going to work. You will have up to 3 minutes to answer each question if you need it. If you get to the 2-minute, 30-second mark, I will mention a 30-second alert. And then if you go beyond 3 minutes, I will ask you to stop, and we'll go to the next question. The forum is going to be recorded and transcribed, and then later would be made available for Ballhead members, association members to read. Are there any questions you have before you get started?
I have none. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, I'll start with the first question, and that would be, why are you interested in becoming a board member at Ballhead Association?
That is a very good question. I have been on the island as a part-time resident for almost 25, 26 years now, and have become more and more interested in island affairs. And I think the number one issue I would like to be involved in is trying to assist with, I think, some of the difficulties we're having with the ARC reviews and folks feeling like they're not getting treated fairly. I'd like to be involved with that process to see if we could set some new standards and to look at the old ones and try to improve that process. I think number two is I'd like to be involved in the decision-making as to how our assessments are planned and used. And I've seen this island grow so much over these years that I want to make sure that I can be a part of maintaining what is wonderful about it while also meeting the needs of our citizens and of our growth. And I think that's very much a part of what the association should be involved in. And I think that long range planning is extremely important. And I would love to be involved in that because I see myself on this island full time in just a few years and would like to be a part of that.
Okay, thank you. The second question would be, tell us about any prior board or nonprofit committee experience you have and how that may be helpful if you are elected.
I will answer that first directly. As far as nonprofit boards, I am currently a board member of the Bald Head Island Villas Association. And it's been so long, Russ, but I think I've been on that board at least 20 years, maybe longer. And I immediately got on that board because I wanted to make sure that we could improve the villas and keep assessments low. And we have been very successful in doing that. And you all may notice that we've made major improvements to the villas just recently after going through a process with the ARC to improve the exteriors and our landscaping. And I think that that experience has been invaluable because we have seen board members come and go. And we have had, I've been fortunate enough to be a steady board member for years. Secondly, outside of your question, I would say that my experience as an attorney and a mediator would be very helpful on the board, given that we are, or I am dealing daily with how to resolve issues in an adversarial capacity and also in a mediating capacity. So I am hopeful that all that experience might help us reach a consensus on the issues that we have to deal with.
Very good, thank you. Third question is, what do you view as key issues for Bald Head Association in the next 3 years and your initial plans to deal with them? Is there one priority you have among these issues?
I think the top priority that I am hearing just from being on the island from everybody is how to improve the ARC process. Um, I am getting feedback all over the island that people do not feel like they're getting treated fairly. Um, I have represented board members in homeowners disputes. I have been involved with HOAs in homeowners disputes, and I know how ugly and petty they can get unless you have a set of guidelines that tells everybody what's expected. And I would love to be involved in looking at the guidelines, trying to produce or, instill more objectivity, more consistency. I think that's the number one issue so that we can maybe resolve some of the hostility that I'm feeling on the island with respect to that process. I think the second most important goal is long-range planning. This island is growing like crazy. People want to be here, and we've got to make sure that we are part of the infrastructure and it's done right. We are seeing more weather events. We need to be involved with the village on helping with flooding and other issues like that. So I think to me, those are the two biggest issues I would like to be involved in and would love to help solve those.
Thank you. Next question is, what is your description of the roles of the board and the management of Bald Head Association?
Excellent question. I think that the board sets kind of the overlying standards or policy that wants to be implemented, and the day-to-day operations are handled by the managers and the staff. And I think that that is always the way it's been. And if there are any overriding issues that come about as far as, bigger issues, the board would address those. But day to day, we are hoping to put people in place that are going to go out and do the day-to-day work that the Bald Head Island Association needs to do. Communicate with the members, tell them what's going on, help implement programs for them, tell them what they need to do whenever they need to submit an ARC application. That's the things that I see them doing. And then if we see issues with those processes, then I think the board needs to become involved with those. But as far as day-to-day stuff, no, not at all. I think that's why you hire good people.
think it is significant to improve rapport with the other island entities? If so, how would you improve those relationships to enhance the experience for Ballhead Association members?
That's an excellent question. And my overwhelming response is yes. We all are on a single island that is very small. We cannot be independent in what we're doing. We have to absolutely coordinate with everybody because we want what's best for everybody on this island. And as an association member, as a property owner, what you do is going to affect the club, the conservancy, um, everything else that's on that island. We need to set up communications on a regular basis. When issues pop up, like for example, erosion, the erosion issue was huge. It caused a lot of strife. It caused a lot of adversity over what we should do to correct it. And we had some entities taking a position that was adverse to others. Why don't we all sit down and discuss common ground on that issue? I think there ought to be monthly or bi-monthly meetings with board members on each of these entities, including the commercial folks. We want to know what they're looking at, what are their issues, what do they need from us? Because, you know, they own property here too. So I think that is a huge issue. It's a great question. And the more we talk, the more we can find common ground. And I think that's very important. And we need to stop misinformation. I mean, guys, come on. Let's make sure what we're talking about is true. And I think that's huge for the future.
Thank you. And the sixth question, if you disagree with a board decision on an issue, would you speak with one voice with the board after the meeting?
There's no doubt. I think you could also always say, you know, our vote is on the record, but we have voted and you need to live with it and you need to move on. You cannot have dissension on your board. I don't understand that. I never will. That's why we have majority vote, and that's why you need to go with it, quite frankly. And if folks don't like the way the majority has been voted, then, you know, come out and be a volunteer and make a change. You know, I get voted down every day. I see jurors who are not happy with the jury verdict, but yet they come out and they say, okay, I'll compromise. And I disagree with what you did, but I'll compromise and we'll go to an unanimous verdict. I mean, that is the way the world works. So I would not backstab anybody. I would not do any of that. You know, that's the way the system works.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Crump, I want to thank you for your time today and for participating in this. And we will take the recording and we'll transcribe the answers, and they will be available later for the association members to review. And you'll also be contacted about some other communications as we go forward in the process.
No problem, Russ.
Any questions you have?
Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good day.
You too.